With Visual Studio Code set up, I'm going to scaffold out a .NET Core Web API project. If you've worked with Visual Studio on Windows, you may be expecting a series of GUI prompts to guide you through the process. But .NET Core with Visual Studio Code is different. Remember that you don't need to use Visual Studio Code with .NET Core. You can use a number of tools, so the SDK is not tied to a single one. Instead, the SDK relies upon a command line tool called .NET, which does the same thing, but with words. Here I've got Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open up the integrated terminal by pressing Control-Tick. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a place to store my project. So I'm going to run make directory -p tilde .NET Core / conference barrel. Now this is going to create a new directory conference barrel, and if necessary, create a folder .NET Core as well, all within my user directory. Next I'm going to change into that folder, so cd tilde .NET Core and conference barrel. Now I can look at the .NET command, and I'll start off by running .NET. Make a little more room here. And you can see that .NET is spelled out, D-O-T-N-E-T. Now this isn't very much information, and that's because .NET uses several subcommands as well, so I'll list those with the help option. So --help. And now we're seeing a lot more, so I'm going to scroll up here. Now there's a lot going on here, and we're going to see quite a few of these commands in the course, but at the moment the one that I want is new. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the options for .NET New, and I'll say .NET New Help. Now the new subcommand is going to generate a project based on a template, and out of the box there are templates for console apps and libraries, and testing, and web apps, and web APIs. So I'll start off with .NET New Web API. Next I want to tell .NET where to generate the project by using the -O option. I'm going to call it server. By default it's going to use the current folder. And I'm also going to use the -N option to give the project a name, otherwise it's going to use the name of the current folder. And I'm just going to say conference barrel server. Now the reason I'm doing it this way is because I'm going to have two projects in this conference barrel folder. The first one is the API that I'm working on now, and the second is an Angular client that I'll work on later. And now I've got a server folder with an ASP.NET Core Web API project. I want to open this in Visual Studio Code, so I'm going to click the Explorer icon in the sidebar and then the Open Folder button. I'm going to navigate to my project folder and then open the server folder. The first time you do this, Visual Studio Code will download some packages from the web to add features to the C# extension like IntelliSense and debugging. After that, we're going to see this prompt. It's asking to add some metadata to the project that will allow building and debugging from inside of the editor. I want to do that, so I'll select yes. And notice that a .vs code folder is added. The generated project is a legitimate web API and can now run. To start it, I'm going to open the terminal again with Control backtick, and I'm going to run the command .NET watch run. Now run will build and start the API on a local development server, and the watch command will automatically restart the server if any changes are detected in the code. That way you don't have to manually stop and restart the server every time you make a small change to one file. Now since this project is an API and not a web application, it has no user interface, so opening it in a browser is pointless. Instead I'm going to use a tool called Postman to work with the API. Here's the home page for Postman, and the URL is getpostman.com. It works across Windows, macOS, and Linux, And the goal of this tool is to allow you to configure HTTP requests and get responses back and be able to inspect the details. Now I've already got it installed, so I'm going to open it. If you get a prompt asking you to sign in, there's a link down at the bottom to skip it. And here I can configure an HTTP request and see the response details. Now the API generated by .NET has a few endpoints, so I'm going to go ahead and try one of those out. I'm going to make a GET request, which is already selected for me, and the endpoint is HTTP localhost 5000 API values. And I'll send it, and I get no response back. And this is because of something new in ASP.NET Core 2.1. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code in order to fix this. The code causing the problem is in startups.cs in the project root. So I'm going to open it by first pressing Command P, and then I'm going to start typing the name of the file. Once it's selected, I can open it. Now at the bottom of the file, there are two new lines for .NET Core 2.1. This app.usehsts and app.usehttps redirection. These have to do with preferring SSL connections over unsecured connections, and for a production API, you'd want them turned on, but for development, they cause problems with Postman. So for now, I'm going to comment them out. And I can comment out lines using Control / or Command / on the Mac. Now when I save this file, the .NET Watcher will notice a change and reload the project. Now if I go back to Postman and send the request again, I'll get a response. And this is what I expect the default API to return. So it means everything is working. And we'll see exactly why this is returned in the next video, so be sure to watch out for it. Thanks for watching.